Hello everyone, it's Heather here at Gypsy Crafter Journals. This is a quick video to show you some of the embellishments that I made for the recent album that's in my Etsy shop, the Hearts and Flowers album. And I'm just showing you here a few of the embellishments that I made. These are the smaller ones. Not all of them are in the scrapbook. I'll probably be using them for different projects. And I made them because I was using some base card that I had punched out ready to go. So I'm trying to use up some of my stash. And these are the base items that I use. So they're basically just tags that I cut out using a punch. And they're mainly craft card, but also there are a few pieces of white as well. A little bit of edging there, and some book page and music page, and a few trimmings from my box, including a doily and also some larger tags as well. So I wanted to use minimal items to make these, because the problem is I get a little bit overwhelmed sometimes when I'm making embellishments. I have so many things, just like many junk journalers, I'm sure, many crafters. We accumulate an awful lot of supplies because we're like magpies and everything is useful. So it can help me in my mental state if I just use a very select range of items. That was me just showing you the ink that I used. It's a Distress ink by Ranger, and some of the 3-in-1 craft glue as well that I was using, because that's great for adding the ribbon. But like I was saying, it can help if you limit the range of items when you are doing a project. So I try to stick to one colour palette, so that in this case I've chosen quite neutral tones, but I did want to add a little bit of pink in there because it's a romantic scrapbook, and I know I was making some of the embellishments for that. So what I'm doing here is just layering up some of the doily and the papers, and I'll be inking round as usual, just to add a little bit of interest and dimension. And I'm sorry, some of that might be off camera, but I'm literally just using a little bit of glue there just to stick it down. Because it's so small, this item, I won't ink it until I've stuck things down, but often I'll ink up the paper before I actually stick it down onto the backing card. So here we go, this is the, I think it's Distress Oxide, and it's the usual one that everybody uses, the vintage photo, just because it goes so well with the craft card that I use, and it gives that lovely vintage effect. It's very popular. So once I've inked it up, I'm going to add some of the ribbon. So I'm just having a look to see which ones work nicely and to see how I'm going to layer them up. And because I'm using a limited range of materials, I don't have too much to choose from, so I don't get too overwhelmed, and I can be a lot quicker making these embellishments. Sometimes it can take me hours to make one embellishment. I'm literally sort of looking through things, I'm looking through boxes trying to find another item. But because I've chosen things that go together, and there's only a small amount of them, it makes it a lot easier for me to put the items onto the embellishment. And I found that this is the success principle for me. It really does help. So I'm just using a little bit of I think it's called Hug Snug seam binding, so I'm just tattering it up a little bit using my fingers, and then obviously inking it up because we want it to look vintage. And I'll be sticking those down. I use a bit of a layering effect, and that sort of gives a little bit of dimension. Sometimes I'll use more than one piece of ribbon, and sometimes just one will suffice. So I'm just sticking that down, and that gives a nice little background for another embellishment. Now, I didn't choose it for this embellishment, but I did pick up some of that lovely flower trim. It's made out of sort of spiraled fabric, or I don't know whether it's ribbon, but it's sort of scalloped, and it makes little flowers on a piece of netting. And it's great because you can cut little items off, or use as many as you like. And it's so brilliant for using in these projects. I use it quite a lot. It's great for using as edging strip, but it makes a wonderful embellishment as well. It lies quite flat, but on this one I've actually chosen to use a dimensional mulberry flower, and I'm just sticking that down with the the 3-in-1 craft glue. And I chose the pink because that goes nicely with the book that I was working on at the time. It does take a little while for this to dry, so it won't be dry immediately, but it does seem to hold really, really strong, this glue. I've only recently discovered it. I'm just adding a couple of little wooden hearts there as well, because again I'm using these, or some of these, in a romantic scrapbook / journal, junk journal. Oh, that's really cute, just sort of rearranging the little items on the tag and trying to make sure that it glues properly. So there's one done. I'm picking a larger tag this time, so I did want a few larger tags. I'm inking around it first because this is a larger item, but I use the same principle that I did for the smaller ones. I'm literally just layering up paper, and then the fabric layers, which would be ribbon. The doilies are fantastic because again they add just a bit of interest because they have a beautiful pattern to them, and even though they're white, they do ink up quite nicely, and they go really well with the colour palette that I was using. I do need to get around to doing some tea or coffee dyeing of papers. I have in the past tended to use the ink rather than tea and coffee dye. I do tea and coffee dyeing for fabrics, but I don't tend to do that for papers because it's such a nuisance trying to dry papers. I live in the UK, and unfortunately the weather's not always brilliant. I heard one YouTuber saying that she did a lot in the summer and then sort of hoards it through the winter, so I probably need to get my gear ready for a summer tea and coffee dyeing session. I did a little bit of ink dyeing, but it does tend to dry quite quickly when I do the ink because I literally spray it on and then hang it on the washing line. So obviously I have to make sure there's no washing near at the time, because what you don't want is your permanent ink all over your bed sheets. It's not a great look. So I'm just inking up the papers before I stick them down onto the tag. And that again just gives a little bit of interest. I know everybody does it, but it's amazing the difference a bit of ink on the edges makes, and I really like that look. So just gluing it down, and luckily I don't have to think too much about this because the colours all go together. All I've done is literally tear out the shape from the paper, so I'm not having to get edges neat and tidy. I don't have to make a specific shape for it to go on there. It's really nice and loose, and looks sort of organic and just a bit different. So I like that. I don't have to think too hard about it, and that's good because it means I actually get something done. If I start to think about things, it can take me hours to complete a project, which isn't always ideal because I don't always have that much time these days. So there's a doily. Getting ready to go. I'm just removing a little bit more of it, and I'll be inking that up so that just coordinates with the rest of the papers and the tag. The good thing about having a limited range of embellishments and materials out also means that it's a lot quicker to clear up, which I have to say I do appreciate. I can get in an awful mess in my craft room sometimes, and I'm trying very much to make sure that I put things away when I've finished. It's a bit of a habit, unfortunately, to sometimes leave things out on the table when I've finished because I've got to rush off and make the kids dinner or something like that, and that then you've got to come back and spend a while tidying up before you start your next project. My craft room is obviously a working craft room. This is how I make a living, so I do need to make sure that I keep it nice and tidy as well, which doesn't always happen, but over the years I have got slightly more organised. I tend to label things up a bit better, and I've learned what works for me a little bit more. So there's one of those lovely sort of rosette flowers from the trim. This is a slightly larger version, and it's quite shabby. It's lovely looking piece, that is. Layers up beautifully with a little bit of lace or those gorgeous mulberry paper roses, or the wooden embellishments. They all go just so well together, even though they're just random. They just look beautiful together. So yeah, I do really like that trim. I'm going to have to see if I can track down some more, because I am getting to the end of my stash with that. I do have a large stash, but not of that particular trim, and I did buy that a number of years ago. But obviously not going out to craft shops so much these days. I used to absolutely love going to fabric shops to look at trim and the gorgeous delights in those little drawers and the jars when you'd ask for some floral trim or some flower trim. It was lovely to go and do that. But sadly, not at the moment, because we are sort of stuck in an awful lot more, and those sorts of shops, unfortunately, are few and far between in this area, and I presume they'd be closed at the moment anyway because of the current situation. Anyway, I'll have a look online no doubt later on. That's reminded me. So just sticking that gorgeous piece of trim down really does make a nice easy embellishment, and it sticks down ever so nicely because it's so lightweight, and it's actually quite opaque because the amount of fabric that's on there. Just sort of fiddling around there to make sure that it looks as I would like it. But that was really quick, and I'm quite pleased how quickly the embellishments in this particular session came together. So it's nice to have a little bit of a session where you aren't thinking too much about what you're making. You can literally put things together, and then sort of within half an hour you've got a nice little pot of pretty things to add to your journal. I know we have an awful lot of things in our craft rooms, don't we? We do keep hold of a lot of embellishments and things, but it's nice to have items that are coordinated, so we don't have to think too hard when we're putting a journal together if we've got a lot of items that are already coordinated. You can see here that I've cut out, I've got a lot of cut out words and labels, and I do sell these as printables in the Etsy shop, but I find I use these a lot. It's nice to have a good supply of words, because they do make embellishment making quite easy when you just have a random word to pop on something, and you can use it as a journaling prompt or as a title, or just to sort of focus what type of photograph perhaps that you're going to use. I have got a selection. The black ones actually in that tray that you can see at the top there are bullet journaling ones, because I'm going to be doing a bullet journal using an altered book this year. But I do have some random words and random labels as well, so I quite like the way that's turned out. I do like the little buttons because they coordinate some of the colours that I'm using, and it's nice to have the word there with blessings on it. So there you go. Thanks very much for watching. Just to show you a couple of the embellishments that I've made this week. Thanks very much for joining me. Take care. Bye.